pagnanais ng taong umunlad sa madaling panahon.
Sino man siya, pag-asa kaya ang dala.
Sana naman, sana siya'y tumira tapat sa bansa.
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan. La 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 la. Sana naman isipin ang kapakanan ng mamamayan, maging gabay sa lipunan.
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Kailan ka huling tumingin sa salamin na may ngiting nababakas sa iyong mukha? Naalala mo bang mga araw na di ka nangangamba para sa iyong pamilya? Kanya-kanya tayo ng pinagdaanan. Ang lahat ay pagod, ang lahat ay takot. Hanggang kailan tayo magtitiis? Magbubulag-bulagan hanggang kailan? Di kaya ito na ang pudya upang tayo ay kumilos. Lunod na ang ating bayan sa tindi ng mga unos. Bumangon na tayo, bumangon na tayo. Bagong umaga na harapin bagong pag-asa. Nasa atin ay gigising tayong lahat. Ang siyang makikilabang sa ating pagbangon, sa ating pag-ahon. Bagong umaga na inaabangan, bagong pag-asa para sa ating bayan o Pilipinas. Handa ka na ba o Pilipinas? Handa ka na ba kay Lenny?
Tinanong ng bata sa mga kawal kung bakit walang sino mang nagtatanggol sa Pilipinas. Nagalit ang kanyang mga kuya at sinabi sa kanya na alagaan ang mga tupa. Ngunit alam ng bata na ipagtatanggol ng Panginoon ang Pilipinas.
Kanya-kanya tayo ng pinagdaanan. Ang lahat ay pagod, ang lahat ay takot. Hanggang kailan tayo magtitiis? Magbubulag-bulagan hanggang kailan? Di kaya ito na ang tudya dami ng mga unos, bumangon na tayo. Bumangon na tayo. Bagong umaga na inaabangan, bagong pag-asa para sa ating bayan o Pilipinas. Handa ka na ba o Pilipinas? Handa ka na ba kay Lady? At sa bagong umaga,
Nagawa niyang tumulong sa kapwa, nagawa niyang mamuno sa tama, nanindigan para kay Juan at kay Juan, laman ng isiping naglaban. Hangad niyang tayo ay mamuhay sa bansang ang lahat ay pantay, may karapatan tungo sa kaunlaran, handang maglingkod kailanman. Lenny Robredo, nagawa niyang lahat, may lakas, may galing at may pusong tapat. Lenny Robredo, ating pinuno, nagawa niyang lahat. Nagawa niyang ikaw ay turuan, buong pusong pinagsilbihan. Pinangat ang lipunan, tinaan sa ating bayan, di tayo pinabayaan. Lenny Robredo, nagawa niyang lahat, may lakas, may galing at may pusong tapat. Lenny Robredo, ating pinuno, nagawa niyang lahat. Tumaan ang bagyo, di sumuko, panulis sa matay, di naglaho. Tumindig, lumipad, taas ang noo, pag-asa ng Pilipino. Nagawa niyang lahat. Robredo, pinuno. Nagawa niyang lahat. Robredo, pinuno. Nagawa niyang lahat. Nagawa niyang lahat. Robredo, pinuno. Lenny Robredo, amigay saludo. Nagawa niyang lahat.
Panahon na ng pagpili, panahon na ng halalan.
Madami namang kandidato, madaming mukha at pangalan.
Sino kaya ang bagay sa ating bansa? Hindi lamang forma at salita. Sino o sino kaya?
at sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Sino kayang mananalo at magiging totoo
Sa pagnanais ng taong
umunlad sa madaling panahon.
Sino man siya, pag-asa kaya ang dala.
Sana naman, sana siya'y humira tapat sa bansa.
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan. La 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 la. Sana naman isipin ang kapakanan ng mga mamamayan, maging gabay sa lipunan.
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Tawagin po natin si Isambayan Convenor Bonnie Macaranas para sa ating opening prayer. Sir Bonnie, may we ask you po to unmute? Thank you.
Okay, good morning sa lahat. Mga kaisambayan, umarap tayo sa ating mahal na Panginoon at purihin siya. Mahal naming Ama sa langit, kami po ay nagpapasalamat na nakapagtipon-tipon kami sa umagang ito. Sa hinaharap namin sa kahirapan at pandemya at hanap buhay sa karamihan ng kababayan nating mahirap, bigyan mo po kami ng karunungan at gabayan mo kami sa tapatan namin ngayon, na makita namin ang totoo at mga kasinungalingan. Sana po, mahal naming Panginoon, kami maliwanagan sa mga kakandidato ngayong eleksyon kung sino ang mga sinungaling at peke, at sino mga kandidatong matino, may integridad, at tunay na matulungin sa mga bayan nating mahihirap. Ito po, Jesus, ito po ang inihingi po namin. Sana po ibigay niyo sa amin sa lahat ng nanonood dito para po mapili namin ang tunay na servant leaders ng bayan. Amen.
Amen.
Bayang mabiliw, pelas ng sinanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiging, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bakaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisag ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nanininig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di manininig.
Isang pinagpalang araw sa inyong lahat. Naririto po tayo muli sa pangalawang Tapatan Media Forum para sa taong 2022. Nais kong batiin ang mga nanonood sa ating Facebook Live at sa live streaming sa YouTube. Hello po sa inyong lahat. Kasama muli natin ang ating mga kapatid sa media ngayong araw para saksihan ang ating pag-uusapan na isang napaka-kontrobersyal po na topic. Sa ating mga kababayang may mga sakit, naku, pagaling po tayo lahat. Ang paksa po natin ngayon, sana hindi na po tayo magkasakit dahil pag-uusapan po natin ngayon ay isang sakit din sa ating lipunan, korupsyon. At ang paksa po natin ngayon ay tungkol sa ill-gotten wealth, isang termino na nakakabit at madalas nating naririnig na laging kasunod ng mga pangalang Marcoses. Ayon sa Presidential Commission on Good Government o PCGG, 174 billion ang nabawi mula sa pamilya Marcos simula nang maitatag ang ahensya at mayroon pang 125 billion pesos na babawiin. Uulitin ko lamang po, nakakalulang mga halaga. 174 billion na ang nabawing nakaw na yaman at 125 billion pesos pa po ang nakaw na yaman na hinahabol ng pamahalaan. Ilang testing centers na kaya ang pwedeng ipatayo ng mga halagang ito para libre magpa-test sa COVID ang ating mga kababayan? Pero ang sigaw at paulit-ulit na itinatanim ng mga loyalists at trolls sa social media, hindi raw ito totoo. Ang pamilya Marcos pa raw po ang ninakawan ng gobyerno at ubo daw ito ng yaman dahil sa Talyano Gold. Kaya narito tayo ngayong umaga upang linawin kung ano nga ba ang katotohanan at kung ano ang mga kasinungalingan sa mga nababasa natin sa social media. Mga kababayan, hindi lahat ng nasa social media ay totoo. Napakaraming trolls dito na ang tanging layunin lamang ay maghasik ng kasinungalingan. Nagnakaw ba talaga ang mga Marcoses sa kabanang bayan? Bakit walang nakakulong sa kanila? Baka naman walang court decision na nagsasabing sila ay guilty. Makakasama po ulit natin ngayong araw si Justice Antonio Carpio at si Justice Conchita Carpio Morales, kasama ang human rights lawyer at martial law detainee na si Attorney Mary Colmenares. Kasama rin po natin ngayong araw na ito ang isang bayan conveners na sina Attorney Howie Calleja at COA Commissioner Heidi Mendoza. Bibigyan po natin ang bawat isa sa ating mga panelists ng ilang minuto para sa kanilang opening statement. And then we can open already the question hour for the media at sa mga nanonood natin mga kababayan live sa social media. Simulan na po natin ang ating tapatan. Justice Carpio, kayo na po ang una. Maraming salamat po.
Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Good morning to everyone. Thank you to the media for joining us this morning in this tapatan on the ill-gotten wealth of the Marcoses. Of course, the biggest case is, of course, the Republic versus 1SAMBAYAN involving the Swiss accounts of the Marcoses. The $658 million secret Marcos accounts in Swiss banks were forfeited in favor of the Philippine government in Republic versus 1SAMBAYAN, a landmark ruling decided in July 2003 by the Philippine Supreme Court and Bank in a unanimous decision. There was no dissent, but there was one who did not take part, and I was the one who did not take part because before I joined the court,
recording in progress.
I was the Chief Presidential Legal Counsel then of President Ramos, and I was in charge of I oversaw the transfer of the Swiss account funds from Switzerland to Manila to Philippine National Bank, and I coordinated with the PCGG, the OSG, the DFA, and the Central Bank. So it was a unanimous decision forfeiting the Swiss accounts of the Marcoses in favor of the government as ill-gotten wealth. The Swiss accounts were in the name of 5 offshore foundations formed between 1971 and 1981 by foreign lawyers upon instruction of former President Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos. The original principal amount of all these Swiss accounts was $256 million, $256 million. But the funds had grown to $658 million due to interests by the time the funds were transferred by the Swiss government to the Philippine National Bank in January of 2002. It cannot be denied that Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos owned these Swiss accounts. The Supreme Court decision narrated, and I quote, on March 20, 1968, after his second year in the presidency, Marcos opened bank accounts with the Swiss Credit Bank using an alias or pseudonym, William Saunders, apparently to hide his true identity. The next day, March 21, 1968, his first lady, Mrs. Imelda Marcos, also opened her own bank accounts with the same bank using an American-sounding alias, Jane Ryan. Found among the voluminous documents in Malacanang shortly after they fled to Hawaii in haste that fateful night of February 25, 1986, were accomplished forms for declaration specimen signatures submitted by the Marcos couple. Under the caption signatures, Ferdinand and Imelda signed their real names as well as their respective aliases underneath. End of quote. In short, when they fled Malacanang, the government that took over discovered all of these documents showing that they opened these accounts. Their signature cards were there. They could not deny that. The Supreme Court continued with its narration. And I quote, one of the latest documents obtained by the PCGG from the Swiss authorities is a declaration signed by Dr. Ivo Beck, the trustee, stating that the beneficial owner of Viber Foundation is Ferdinand E. Marcos. Another document signed by G. Raber of Swiss Credit Bank shows that Viber Foundation is owned by the Marcos family, end of quote. So the Swiss banks themselves said that these accounts are owned by the Marcoses. And the people who were trustees in this bank, whose names appear as the directors, said in writing, the Swiss accounts belong to the Marcoses. The narration continued, and I quote, FM and Imelda issued the written mandate to establish the foundation to Marcos Gil of Swiss Credit Bank on March 3, 1970. In the handwritten regulations signed by the Marcos couple, as well as in the typewritten regulations signed by Marcos Gil, both dated February 13, 1970, the Marcos spouses were named the first beneficiaries, the surviving spouse as the second beneficiary, and the Marcos children, Aimee, Ferdinand Jr., or Bongbong, and Irene, as equal third beneficiaries, end of quote. The narration of the Supreme Court continued. On March 10, 1981, Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos issued a written order to the board of Winthrop to liquidate the foundation and transfer all its assets to Bank Hoffman in Zurich in favor of Fides Trust Company, end of quote. Again, the narration continues, and I quote, latest documents received from Swiss authorities included a declaration signed by Ivo Beck stating that the beneficial owner of Avertina Foundation are FM and Imelda. Another document signed by G. Raber of Swiss Credit Bank indicates that Avertina Foundation is owned by the Marcos family, end of quote. There are so many here instances, overwhelming, mind-boggling, all documents showing that Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos opened the accounts, managed the accounts, gave written instructions to the accounts. They're all there in this case. And there are just too many. I will not continue with the narration. Thus, the evidence is simply overwhelming, beyond dispute, beyond any shadow of doubt that Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos owned the secret Swiss accounts. There can be no dispute whatsoever. The documents are there. They're real. They were found in Malacanang. And the banks themselves in Switzerland affirmed that the bank accounts were owned by the Marcos couple. Now, Section 2 of Republic Act 1379, entitled An Act Declaring Forfeiture in Favor of the State any property found to have been unlawfully acquired by any public officer or employee. This is a 1955 law which explicitly states, and I quote, whenever any public officer or employee has acquired during his incumbency an amount of property which is manifestly out of proportion to his salary as such public officer or employee and to his other lawful income and income from legitimately acquired property, said property shall be presumed prima facie to have been unlawfully acquired. End of quote. So this is the law. This is the unexplained wealth law. If you're a public officer and you are found to have properties that are beyond your income, beyond your salary, beyond your legitimate income, these properties will be presumed to be unlawfully acquired. And if you cannot prove that you legitimately acquired these properties, they will be forfeited in favor of the state, Philippine state. Now, the total net worth of Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos when they left office in February 1996, when they fled, their total net worth was only $304,372.43 US dollars. $372,372 US dollars. So not even $500,000, their total net worth. And therefore, their net worth was totally and grossly insufficient to justify any lawful acquisition and ownership of the principal amount of 256 million US dollars in Swiss accounts. The Supreme Court decision stated, and I quote, that spouses Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos were public officials during the time material to the instant case was never in dispute. The combined accumulated salaries of the Marcos couple were reflected in the certification dated May 27, 1986, issued by then Minister of Budget and Management Alberto Romulo. The certification showed that from 1966 to 1985, Ferdinand E. Marcos and Imelda R. Marcos had accumulated salaries in the amount of 1,570,000 pesos and 718,750,000 pesos respectively, or a total of 2,288,750 pesos. So 2.2 million pesos only. Their total accumulated salaries from the time they entered office until the time they fled Malacanang in 1986. So converted to US dollars, the narration continues, converted to US dollars on the basis of the corresponding peso-dollar exchange rates prevailing during the applicable period when said salaries were received, the total amount had an equivalent value of 304,372 US dollars. 304,372 US dollars, not even $500,000. Their total income from the Philippine government from the time they occupied Malacanang in 1966 up to the time they fled. The Supreme Court said the sum of 304,372 US dollars should be held as the only known lawful income of respondents Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos, since they did not file any statement of assets and liabilities as required by law from which their net worth could be determined. So they did not file their statement of assets and liabilities in violation of the law. So you could not determine what exactly was their net worth except from the salaries. The Supreme Court said, besides, and I quote, besides under the 1935 Constitution, Ferdinand E. Marcos as president could not receive, the Constitution says, any other emolument from the government or any of its subdivisions and instrumentalities. So as far as President Marcos was concerned, that was his only income, his official salary under the Constitution. Likewise, under the 1973 Constitution, Ferdinand E. Marcos as president could, and I quote the Constitution, not receive during his tenure any other emolument from government or any other source, end of quote. So the Supreme Court said under the Constitution, there was no other income that they could receive lawfully except from their salaries. Thus, the Supreme Court concluded, and I quote, in the face of undeniable circumstances and the avalanche of documentary evidence against them, respondent Marcoses failed to justify the lawful nature of their acquisition of the said assets. Hence, the Swiss deposits should be considered ill-gotten wealth and forfeited in favor of the state in accordance with Section 6 of Republic Act 1379. And I quote Section 6. If the respondent is unable to show to the satisfaction of the court that he has lawfully acquired the property in question, then the court shall declare such property forfeited in favor of the state. And by virtue of such judgment, the property aforesaid shall become property of the state. So the Swiss accounts were declared property of the state. Now, what was the position of Bongbong Marcos on the ill-gotten Swiss accounts? The Supreme Court decision stated, and I quote, the pre-trial brief of Mrs. Marcos was adopted by the three Marcos children. In said pre-trial brief, Mrs. Marcos had stressed that the funds involved were lawfully acquired. So Mrs. Marcos, Imelda, said the funds in the Swiss accounts were lawfully acquired, and the Marcos children adopted that. Thus, Bongbong Marcos also claimed, just like her mother Imelda, that the Swiss accounts were lawfully acquired by the Marcos family. In short, Bongbong Marcos was also claiming ownership of a portion of the Swiss accounts as part of the estate of Ferdinand Marcos. Because Ferdinand Marcos had died, and he said, I'm also entitled to the Swiss accounts because that was lawfully acquired by my father. So Bongbong Marcos claimed part of the Swiss accounts. The Marcos family, however, was just engaging in dilatory tactics. While all the members of the Marcos family claimed in their pre-trial brief that the Swiss accounts were lawfully acquired, they all made a complete turnaround during the pre-trial itself in the Sandigan when they disowned ownership of the Swiss accounts. So they said in their pre-trial brief that they submitted in writing to the Sandigan, those Swiss deposits were lawfully acquired by the Marcos family. But when the pre-trial took place, they made a complete turnaround. I'll quote the Supreme Court decision. Quoting now the Supreme Court, this is yet another indication that respondents presented fictitious defense because during pre-trial, Mrs. Marcos and the Marcos children denied ownership of or interest in the Swiss accounts. So they denied ownership of the Swiss accounts. In their written submission, they said they owned it lawfully, but during the pre-trial, they denied. So what was the thinking of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court said in the decision, and I quote, we are convinced that the strategy of respondent Marcoses was to confuse petitioner republic as to what facts they would prove or what issues they intended to pose for the court's resolution. There is no doubt in our mind that they were leading petitioner republic and now this court to perplexity, if not trying to drag this forfeiture case to eternity, end of quote. So it was a dilatory tactic. The court saw through it. Now, to date, some 174 billion of ill-gotten wealth has been recovered by the PCGG from the Marcoses and their cronies. The PCGG expects to recover another 125 billion, the amount that is still under litigation as of September 2021. Now, the bottom line here is Bongbong Marcos a certified convict who is now running for president, actually claimed part of the Swiss account. The Swiss account that is the ill-gotten wealth of Ferdinand Marcos, he claimed it as his inheritance. That's the bottom line here. Well, incidentally, Bongbong Marcos was the court-appointed administrator of the estate of Ferdinand Marcos. As court-appointed administrator, Bongbong Marcos has refused to pay the 25-year-old final estate tax liability of the Marcos estate, which has now grown to 203 billion pesos due to interest and penalties. So Bongbong Marcos claimed as his inheritance part of the Swiss accounts. As administrator of the estate of Ferdinand Marcos, he was ordered to pay the tax liability. At that time, it was 27 billion. Now, because they did not pay it with interest and penalties, it's now about 203 billion pesos, and he still refuses to pay. And yet, he's running for president of the Philippines. With that, I end my short presentation. Thank you, and a pleasant day to everyone.
Thank you very much, Justice Tony. Ayan po mga kababayan, unang pasabog doon sa mga nagsasabing walang kaso na nagsasabi na guilty ang pamilya Marcos. Ayan po sinabi ni Justice Carpio at 2003 case, Republic versus Sandigan Bayan. Itong unexplained wealth law po, naku, marami rin po siguro matatamaan ito sa ngayon, no? Kasi sinasabi dito na kapag hindi proportionate ang kita o sahod ng nanunungkulan sa gobyerno, naku, siguro po ay nakaw na yaman ang kanyang mga kayamanan sa ngayon. So okay, so ang susunod po ay si Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales. Ombudsman Morales.
Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Naimbag ang bigatay amin na po. Thank you for joining us in this event. Because there has been this propaganda and people believe it, that indeed the Marcoses did not have any unexplained wealth. They harping on the alleged tons and tons of gold that Marcos purchased earlier. We thought it proper to enlighten the public that, as Justice Carpio has already mentioned, there have been some cases wherein the Supreme Court declared that Marcos and his family had ill-gotten wealth. One such case I'm going to dwell on this morning are the cases of Yochenko et al. And Republic of the Philippines versus the Sandigan Bayan, which the Supreme Court decided in 2006. Okay, when the Marcoses were ousted by people power in 1986, the Republic of the Philippines, through the PCGG, filed a complaint before the Sandigan Bayan for recovery of alleged unexplained wealth. The Yuchenkos filed complaints in intervention. In the course of the proceedings, the Sandigan Bayan came up with interlocutory orders dismissing the complaint or denying rather the motion of the Yuchenkos for a separate, another dates of trial, given the fact that they failed to show up when they were supposed to present evidence. In this interlocutory order also, the Sandigan Bayan denied the motion of the Republic for additional time to present evidence, as in fact the Sandigan Bayan directed the Republic to offer its evidence within 30 days. That prompted the Yuchenkos and the Republic to go to the Supreme Court via petitions for certiorari. There being no restraining order issued by the Supreme Court, the Sandigan Bayan continued with the proceedings in the complaint. In the meantime, the Sandigan Bayan issued a partial decision dismissing the complaint of the Republic for lack of merit and allowing, or rather granting, the motion of Imelda Cojuangco et al. For summary judgment. Again, the Republic of the Philippines and the Huchencos went to the Supreme Court via petitions for certiorari. These 5 petitions were consolidated. The first 4 were dismissed, denied by the Supreme Court. That left the Supreme Court to dwell on the petition of the Republic for the reconveyance of 111,415 shares of stock of PTIC, or Philippine Telecommunications Investment Corporation, which were registered in the name of Philippine Holdings Incorporated. Recall that Philippine Holdings Incorporated was organized in 1977 with no known beneficial owner. I'm going to discuss later how it was organized. Anyway, the Cojuangcos maintained that they are the beneficial owners of PHI. Oddly, Imelda Marcos, in her cross-claim before the Sandigan Bayan, said that they are the owners of they are the beneficial owners of PHI. In other words, admittedly, the Marcoses were the beneficial owners of PHI. Anyway, later, the Cojuangcos, who were also stockholders of PTIC, PTIC at the time was the biggest stockholder of PLDT. It had 28% of stock holdings of common shares. Later, Cojuangco and Luis Revilla, who was also a stockholder of PTIC, sold 111,415 PTI shares to PHI. Now, in the course of its review, the Supreme Court went over the testimonial and documentary evidence presented by the Republic before the Sandigan Bayan. It noted, among other documents, the sworn statements and the position of Hosea Ocampos, a known crony and dummy of Ferdinand Marcos, who stated that he was requested by Ferdinand Marcos to organize, manage, and administer 23 corporations for and in his behalf. Okay, so Yao said that he did as requested and asked his associates to be the stockholders of these corporations, including PHI. His associates had to be the incorporators because he trusted them. The policy being that the incorporators would accomplish a deed of assignment or deed of trust signed by them, the original of which would, as indeed Campos did, bring it to Ferdinand Marcos. Of course, the incorporators at the time perhaps did not know, or were so naive that they did not know who was the beneficial owner of these 23 corporations, including PHI. Anyway, this testimony of this in a statement of Hosea Ocampos was corroborated by Rodolfo Gafud, his financial consultant, to whom he turned over the management and administration of PHI after Campos suffered a heart attack in the late 70s. Okay, Gafud, as I said, corroborated essentially the material statements of Yao Campos that the deed of assignment or deed of trust were accomplished by him along with other officers and incorporators. PHI, other corporations, and that the original of these deeds were given to an unnamed beneficiary, which Campos identified as Ferdinand Marcos. Okay, so as I think I said earlier, even Imelda admitted that the Marcoses are the beneficial owners of PHI. So since the Sandigan Bayan dismissed the complaint of the Republic, the Supreme Court assiduously went over the evidence. By ponderance of evidence, the Supreme Court held that the established facts vis-a-vis human experience showed that Marcos was the beneficial owner of the PHI shares, which were actually PTI shares registered in the name of PHI. And so the Supreme Court ordered by a decision of January 2006, the reconveyance by PHI, the Kukwangkos, etc., or et al., of PTI shares 111,415, but registered in the name of PHI to the Republic. As indeed, eventually, after a motion for reconsideration by the private respondents was denied by the Supreme Court, the decision attained finality. It might interest you to know that the 111,415 shares of stock were sold to First Pacific in 2007. It's a Hong Kong firm for 15 billion plus pesos. Let me conclude by quoting something that I came across some time ago. It says, I don't understand why. Well, it's something like this. I don't understand why some people keep on lying and they don't even feel bad about it. Do you understand? I don't. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Morales. Ayan po, no, alam na alam ni Justice Cheat ang ating kaso na kanyang i-discuss. Kasi nga naman po, siya ang ponente o siya yung nagsulat mismo. She was the one who penned the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Yuchenko versus Sandigan Bayan. Kung saan po doon ang Korte Suprema, pagkatapos na binawi ang shares of stocks po ng Cuangco family, ay ibinalik sa gobyerno ng Pilipinas ang mga shares of stocks po na ito, at sa pamamagitan nito ay naibenta ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas ito for 27 billion pesos. So maraming salamat, Justice Morales, sa inyong presentation po. Sa ngayon naman po, after discussing forfeiture and dummy corporations, na-discuss din po ni Justice Morales ang paggamit ng mga dummy, no? O mga tao na, kumbaga, sila daw kuno yung nagmamay-ari ng mga shares, pero hindi po pala sila. Kaya nga po dummy ang tawag sa kanila, no? Pero ang Marcos family po pala. So after discussing the forfeiture and dummy cases, now we will move to a more personal experience during the time of President Marcos. We will now call on Attorney Nery Colmenares to share his experience as martial law detainee and human rights lawyer during the martial law era. Attorney Nery, you have the floor.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat ng mga kasamahan ko sa Isang Bayan. It's great to see old friends again in here, Justice Carpio Morales, sila Howard, sila Heidi, at lahat ng mga kasamahan ko dati sa Isang Bayan. Salamat at congratulations sa Isang Bayan for holding such a very important forum na kung saan nagdi-discuss essentially kung si Bongbong Marcos ba iluklok natin sa Malacanang o dapat singilin siya sa kanyang mga kasalanan. So basically, yun ang esensya ng tema natin ngayong araw. The sins of the father cannot visit the son. No? May media na nagtanong sa akin kamakailan na dapat bang singilin o sisihin sa ang anak dahil sa kasalanan ng tatay? Ang sagot ko, hindi dapat. Bakit naman sisihin ng anak sa kasalanan ng tatay niya? But Bongbong Marcos is being made to account not for the sins of his father, but his actions itself. Yung ginawa mismo ni Bongbong Marcos at hindi yung ginawa ng tatay niya. Una muna, ang pinakamalaking kasalanan ni Bongbong Marcos sa sambayan ng Pilipino ay hinadlangan niya ang pagsoli ng ill-gotten wealth sa mamamayang Pilipino. Hundreds of billions of pesos na sana pwedeng magamit sa libreng gamot, libreng paggamot, libreng ayuda para sa mahihirap. Anong klaseng presidente ka? Hinadlangan mo ang pagsoli ng karapat-dapat na pera ng taong bayan? Nandun ako sa Hawaii noong 1999. I argued before Judge Real in the Hawaii District Court regarding the offer of Bongbong Marcos. Si Bongbong Marcos noon ay executor ng kayamanan ng kanyang tatay. At nag-offer siya na ang nakita o nabistong $650 million sa Swiss banks na ill-gotten wealth ay i-compromise at ibigay ang $150 million sa mga human rights victims. Tutol ako noon at ang sabi ko, grabing pera ang ipagkait sa taong bayan niya. Nagkasagutan nga kami ni Judge Real doon Kasi $650 million, tapos quits lang yon, happy na ang mga Marcoses, bigyan ng $150 million ang mga human rights victims. Ba hindi naman pwede yan. Ayon sa Korte Suprema, sabi nga ni Justice Carpio, $304,000 ang total net worth niyo mula na naging presidente ka hanggang 1986. Paano ka nagkaroon ng daang-daang milyong dolyares na hindi ko umabot ng $1 million ang net worth mo ng mga Marcoses Galing daw sa gold. Ano ba naman? Gold, wala nakakita ng gold na yan. Pangalawa, kung tatanggapin natin yung explanation ng gold na yan bilang source ng kanilang income, abay dili lahat pala ng mga government o public officials na mabistong nagnakaw, abay madali lang pala silang makalusot. Sabihin lang nila may na-discover akong gold. Hindi pwede yan. Na klaro sa mga datos at sa Korte Suprema at mga desisyon na grabe, hundreds of billions of pesos ang pinagkait sa taong bayan. At yan ang ginawa ni Bongbong Marcos, hindi ang gawa ng tatay niya. Yung paghadlang mismo na maibalik yung hundreds of billions na yan sa mamamayang Pilipino, napakalaking bagay yan, napakalaking krimen yan sa mamamayang Pilipino. Ikalawa, hindi siya nagbayad ng tax. Okay, pwede ba naman yon? 1980, Vice Governor siya ng Ilocos Norte. 1983, Gobernador siya ng Ilocos Norte. May income siya, may sahod siya. Hindi siya nagbayad ng tax. Noong 1985, inappoint siya na board member ng tatay niya sa Philcomsat, isang malaking korporasyon na napanghawakan ng mga Marcoses. Ang reported na sahod niya doon is $9,700. Hindi naman siya nagbayad ng tax. Pwede ba yun? Ikaw gusto mo maging presidente. Pag presidente ka, i-implement mo, executive ka nga, i-execute mo yung batas. Sasabihan mo lahat ng mamamayan, kukubahin mo ang taong bayan sa taxes. Ang municipal clerk sa isang munisipyo magbabayad ng tax. Ang ordinaryong guro magbabayad ng tax. Ikaw na mayaman ka pa nga Hindi ka nagbabayad ng tax. Anong klaseng presidente ka? Yun ang malaking kasalanan ni Bongbong Marcos dyan. Kasi sa yaman nila na hindi natin alam kung saan nanggaling yaman na yan, abay palagi niyang sinasabi na wala silang kinalaman doon.
Hello? I think Attorney Colmenares was cut. Okay. Maybe we can ask him to reconnect po. In the meantime, maybe we can... Okay. Okay, so nakat po si Attorney Colmenares. So while waiting for him to come back.
Hello. Yes, sorry. Hindi ko alam kung
Okay.
saan ako naputol. So doon na lang ako sa pangatlo sigurong kasalanan. Ang pangatlong kasalanan ni Bongbong Marcos sa taong bayan, hindi na siya complicit doon sa martial law. Bahagi siya ng martial law government. Gobernador ka ng Ilocos Norte, bahagi ka ng martial law government, at including of course ng human rights violations sa Ilocos Norte nung panahon mo. In fact, nakita niyo sa mga pictures, nung EDSA People Power, naka-military fatigue si Bongbong Marcos, ready to shoot at Filipinos na nagde-demand lang na mag-step down si President Marcos. Anong klaseng presidente ka? Hinadlangan mo ang pagsoli ng hundreds of billions of pesos para sa mamamayang Pilipino? O hindi ka nagbabayad ng taxes habang yung ordinaryong mamamayan nagbabayad ng taxes? Kahit mahirap na mamamayan, ikaw ang yaman-yaman mo. Pangatlo, hindi ka lang complicit. You did not only tolerate martial law. You were part of martial law. So yun ang sinasabi ko na kasalanan niya, na sinisingil siya dyan. Kaya sa darating na halalan, gusto niya maging presidente. Mataas siya sa survey ngayon, sabi nila. Pero tingin ko, yan, mababakbak yan. Basta porsigido lang tayo magpaliwanag sa taong bayan, sa ating mga kababayan, ng tunay na track record ni Bongbong Marcos, nung kanyang mga posisyon sa martial law, yung sinseridad niya, at yung mga ginawa niyang kasalanan. Ibabalik niya ang idol niya ang martial law, golden era ang martial law, yun ang gusto niyang i-implement. Hindi golden era ang martial law. In fact, 12% at least ang unemployment rate ng martial law. Milyong-milyong mga manggagawa walang trabaho. At least 47% ang inflation rate ng martial law. Ibig sabihin, napakataas ng presyo ng bilihin noon. Dito nga, 4, 5, 6% lang inflation rate. Hirap na tayo dahil ang mahal-mahal, how much more yung 47%? 49% ang poverty incidence ng martial law. Kalahati halos ng mamamayang Pilipino below poverty threshold, naghihirap. Paano naging golden era ang martial law? Tingnan nyo, search nyo sa internet, Joel Abong. Yan ang mukha ng gutom ng panahon ng martial law. Yung batang yan, kinakunan ng picture, 7 years old or 8 years old, payat, namatayan after a few weeks na makuha ang retrato na yan ng isang international Newsweek o Time magazine ang nakakuha noon. So, yun yung issue dito sa golden era na ito. Ayaw nating maibalik yung ganong klaseng presidente na naniniwala ang korupsyon, ang cronyism, ang human rights violations ay isang magandang era sa sambayan ng Pilipino. Mawawalan ng saysay ang kasaysayan kung magkaroon ng Marcos muli sa Malacanang. At sigurado ko, sa ating porsigido, determinadong pag-organisa, pagkonsolidad, pagpaliwanag sa taong bayan ng tunay na katangian ng mga Marcos, mababakbak yung sinasabi nilang linya at mananalo at mananaig ang sambayan ng Pilipino. I always believe we can do that. Marcos was a very powerful dictator during martial law. He was the executive because he was the president. He issued laws, therefore he was also the legislative. He was also Congress. He issued warrants of arrest. He was also the judiciary. 3 branches of government in one dictator. But lo, one day, behold, one fateful day of February of 1986, the Filipino people stood up and said, tama na, sobra na. Kaya napatalsik ang isa sa pinaka-powerful na diktador noong panahong yon. At kaya pa rin ng sambayan ng Pilipino yan because I believe that we will win against corruption, against brutality, and against repression because we are on the side of the just. We will win in this battle against repression, against corruption, because we are on the side of the truth. And we will win this battle against corruption and repression because we are on the side of the people. Maraming salamat po. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much po, Attorney Colmenares, for the very inspiring words and message. Ayan po, narinig po natin ang mga pahayag ng ating mga panelists ngayong tapatan. Pero bago po natin buksan ang ating open forum, pakinggan po natin muli ang ating house rules. Para po sa mga katanungan, 2 paraan po, raise hand, at antayin pong tawagin ang inyong pangalan o isulat po sa inyong katanungan sa chat box ng Zoom. Sa mga nanonood naman po sa ating FB Live, pwede rin po kayong magtanong gamit ang comment box. At ang unang magtatanong po ay, meron na po ba tayong mga magtatanong from the media? If wala pa po, magtatanong po muna kami from Facebook. Babasahin ko lamang po, no? Isang katanungan po para kay Attorney Colmenares. Attorney Neri, can you please describe how it was to be in jail during the martial law years?
Well, I was 18 years old at the time. I was the chairman of the Student Catholic Action. Wala naman kaming issue na human rights lamang issue namin. Ibalik ng Student Council school papers. I was arrested by virtue of an aso of President Marcos. 18 years old, hindi niya ako kilala eh. And then I was brought to prison together with a few other church workers. At doon, grabe ang torture. Lahat ng torture sa 5 or 6 na araw na torture kami. Ako, kasi hiwalay kaming tinutorture. Lahat yan, yung nilalagyan pa ng M16 bullets dito sa pagitan ng daliri mo, tapos pinipisahan na gano'n. Sakit noon. Kuryente dito sa batok. Tapos bugbog siyempre, tadyak, lahat. Lahat na yon, paso ng sigarilyo. Sabi ko, anong klaseng gobyerno nagtutorture sa 18 anyos? 18 anyos? You're a kid. Bakit ka torturein? Ano naman? So, wala namang kaso na may sinampa silang kaso later on, pero wala namang ebidensya doon, dismiss ng korte. So, ibig ko lang sabihin, sa total na 4 na taon kong nakulong ng panahon ni Marcos, wala akong ginawang kasalanan. Wala akong pinatay, wala akong ninakaw, wala naman akong sinakta na kapwa ko. Tapos ako yung nakulong. 4 na taon ng buhay ko ang nawala. Tapos sila, na grabe ang nakawan, grabe ang human rights violation. Sila hanggang ngayon parang namamayagpag pa. Kaya very personal sa human rights victims ang nangyari. Sabi nila, move on, move on. Paano ka mag-move on? Walang hustisya. Balik nyo kaya muna ang nakaw na yaman. Mahirap naman mag-move on tayo ng ganyan. So yun ang personal experience ko ng martial law. And I think what kept me going was that I've always believed that I was just doing what is right. I was just doing what is reasonable and just. At yun siguro ang dapat na inspiration nating lahat ngayon. Ang tingin natin, tama tayo eh. Tingin naman natin, nasa side tayo ng kasaysayan, nasa side tayo ng mamamayang Pilipino. Kaya gaano mong kahirap, gaano mong kadami ang pera nila, hindi tayo magpapadaig dyan. Tingin ko yung ganong klaseng hope and trust sa capacity ng Filipino people. Yun palagi yung sinasabi ko. There are 2 basic concepts that made me continue in my pursuit and advocacy for human rights and a better government. At una dyan, syempre, trust in the capacity of the Filipino people to change society, to reform this country. Trust in the capacity of the Filipino people to change their quote-unquote destiny. We are not destined to eternal poverty and repression. That's not our destiny. So tingin ko yun ang una, may tiwala tayo sa kakayahan ng sambayan ng Pilipino na baguhin ito. Kasi kung wala na tayong tiwala sa sambayan ng Pilipino, hindi mag-abroad na lang tayo lahat, manahimik na lang tayo. But because we have trust, we hope. Kaya ang hope na yan, very important sa atin. And I think that trust and hope will win out in the end in 2022. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Attorney Neri. Next po, we have Mr. Adrian Ayarin of ABS-CBN. Adrian?
Yes, good morning. Good morning po sa lahat. 2 questions sana. Yung una, yung sa 125 billion po na sinasabing i-recover pa. Pasensya na po kung medyo hypothetical yung tanong. What will happen to that under a Marcos Jr. Presidency?
Yeah. Maybe you're addressing the question to Justice Carpio, Adrian?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. That's really the problem because if Bongbong Marcos becomes president, I do not expect the 125 billion to be recovered anymore. The first thing he'll do, he'll probably abolish the PCGG. And there's a bigger problem because he owes the government 203 billion pesos as of now for the estate tax. He's the administrator of the estate. He has been ordered by the court to pay. He refuses to pay up to now. And nobody seems to hold him to account for that. If he becomes president, lalo na. Goodbye na yan. And that 203 billion, if you do not collect that within 5 years, you do not send even a demand letter, that prescribes. Hindi mo na makolekta yan. So he has 6 years. Hindi siya magpapadala ng collection letter against himself. So that right of the Filipino people to recover 202 billion pesos in asset tax will be gone forever. Hindi lang yan, madami pang iba. What about because remember, as Justice Chit Morales explained, Imelda intervened in the PLDT case. The Marcos family claimed that they own PLDT. Maging presidente siya. Siyempre, habulin niya yan. Iipitin niya lahat yan. Iipitin niya, in fact, Imelda also claims San Miguel. He said that they own half of the shares of Danding Coangco. Iipitin niya lahat yan sila. Hindi sabihin niya, oy, amin yan, hindi kayo, you got it, you did not pay us for our share. Magkakagulo lahat yan, magkakaablahan. Lucio Tan. The Marcoses have the affidavit of Lucio Tan that half of the companies of Lucio Tan belong to the Marcoses. And there is a pending case now in the Supreme Court that will be decided soon on the claim of Mrs. Marcos that they own half of the companies of Lucio Tan. Madami yan. Also, the properties of the GMA7, the Unilab, they will reopen all of that. Sasabihin nila, half of your companies belong to us. Magkakagulo tayo. That's only one part of it. Thank you.
Pasensya na po. Follow-up ko lang din kay Justice Carpio and kay Justice Morales din for sa Isang Bayan. Paano na po yung endorsement sa senatorial race with Attorney Neri na nandito invited din? May update po ba tayo sa senatorial endorsement and also sa vice presidency? Parang wala pa rin po ata.
Well, on the vice presidency, of course, we have adopted the Lenny Kiko ticket. That's from the very start. On the endorsement of the other senatorial candidates, we are working on that and we'll be meeting soon to endorse the others because one condition that we have is that we will endorse you for the Senate if you declare for the Lenny Kiko ticket. So we're just waiting for that. Whoever makes that declaration they are for the Lenny Kiko ticket, then we will support them for the Senate. Thank you.
So may chance po ba na buong yung existing ngayon na Lenny Kiko ticket will be endorsed by Isang Bayan?
Well,
or pwede po bang masama rin si Attorney Neri? Ano po bang pwede namin ma-expect?
Well, we're already making a decision on Attorney Neri, but our condition is you must declare, and the other guest candidates have not declared. You have Escudero, you have Binay, you have Zubiri, and Gordon. They have not declared. So if they do not declare soon, we will have to declare whoever we find acceptable and who have declared for the Lenny Kiko ticket. Thank you.
May we also hear from Attorney Neri rin po? Clarification, nabanggit niyo po Attorney Neri kanina, hindi na po kayo ngayon part ng Isang Bayan as convener?
Yes, Adrian, kasi when I filed my certificate of candidacy, nag-leave ako, umalis ako sa Isang Bayan kasi Isang Bayan hindi pwedeng nandun ako, convener ako. So yun. In that sense, hindi na ako part. But of course, bahagi ako sa pag-search ng isang bayan na ma-unify ang opposition. At syempre, magkaroon ng isang opposition na presidente sa 2022 at hindi yung Marcos Duterte na presidency. Yeah, ang comment ko dyan, nabanggit ko naman dati, nag-ano ako sa isang bayan to respect the process. Ngayon, ang Makabayan, wala pa kaming napiling presidente dahil na sa kalagitnaan pa ng mga diskusyon regarding na plataforma. So ang plataforma, very important yan sa Makabayan kasi ang karamihan ng members namin, magsasaka, manggagawa, and they will be asking kung ikakampanya namin yan, ano naman ang plataforma niya hinggil sa manggagawa, sa magsasaka, ganun. So yun, it will come soon naman. I'm sure darating naman yun. Magkakaroon kami ng choice na sa watalan ng konti nitong Pasko syempre at COVID. But I think Makabayan will be arriving at a decision soon din sa presidential endorsement namin. Salamat po, Adrian.
Okay, thank you po. Abang na lang po kami.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Another question po from Pocholo Concepcion of Daily Tribune. Pocholo. Okay, maybe I'll just read the question. This is still about the 125 billion in Marcos ill-gotten wealth locked in the courts. Is it true that Bongbong Marcos proposed that they keep 1/3 of it and the government refused? Okay, maybe I can address this to Justice Tony. Is it true though po that Bongbong Marcos proposed that the Marcos family will keep the 1/3 of the 125 billion ill-gotten wealth and the government refused?
Well, I have not heard that that proposal. I think they made an offer to President Duterte early in the Duterte administration, but nothing happened. I think their strategy is to delay and delay, give us hope, and once they capture the presidency, that's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Tony. Another question is from Ms. Sandra Aguinaldo. I'll just read the question of Ms. Sandra. It has been months since 1SAMBAYAN started explaining to the people about what happened during the Marcos years. Do you think you are succeeding in convincing the people? Okay, maybe Justice Morales can answer this question of Ms. Sandra Aguinaldo. Do you think that 1SAMBAYAN is succeeding in convincing the people after all our explanations about what happened during the Marcos years? Thank you.
There is no doubt that we're convincing the people. We'll just have to go on with the momentum of telling them, repeating what we are advocating, that a Marcos presidency will let the country slide down more, will go down the hill more. So we believe that we are succeeding, and that's the reason why we don't stop talking before the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, po. Another question from Facebook, Leon Fernandez. Why is it taking so long to get all the money that belongs to the Filipinos? Maraming nagsasabi, bakit hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin nakukuha kung talagang may ninakaw? At bakit wala naman daw pong nakakulong kahit merong mga Supreme Court decision? Justice Tony?
Well, there is a case in the Sandigan Bayan that convicted Imelda Marcos, and that's on appeal. And of course, you cannot convict a dead person anymore because Marcos died. And when you die, criminal liability is extinguished, although civil liability remains. That's why we're recovering the assets in civil cases. So kaya walang nakulong because the man himself who declared martial law died. And I think the next administration should do it very simply. There is 203 billion in taxes that can be collected right away. It's final and executory. It cannot be questioned anymore. All that has to be done is to execute it. So the BIR could just attach all the properties of the Marcoses, because when Ferdinand Marcos died, the estate was supposed to pay the first priority was to pay the estate tax, then the other creditors. And no asset of the estate can be transferred to the heirs, to the children, and to Mrs. Marcos until the estate tax is paid. That's the law. But you can see them, they are spending for elections in billions of pesos. They have houses in Forbes Park, condominiums everywhere. How did they buy these properties when they cannot, under the law, use the assets of the estate to buy any property without paying first the government for the estate tax? Nobody has been attending to this. Of course, President Duterte never attended to that because the Marcoses supported him. So the next government should just do it. Attach all these properties. They have houses in Forbes Park. That's where Bongbong lives. You see that medical certificate that he issued when he did not attend the hearing in the COMELEC. He was there in his residence in Forbes Park. How did he get that property when the estate cannot be distributed without paying first the estate tax? Thank you.
Okay. Just another question po. Pag manalo daw po si VP Robredo bilang presidente, ano-ano daw po yung mga kailangan niyang gawin para hindi na maulit ang pagsubok ng isa pang Marcos, isang kilalang korap na politiko na tumatakbo muli?
Well, it starts with the people. We have to educate the people. You know, when after 1986, the Marcoses made a strategic move. They tried to start changing the story of martial law, that it was the golden years. And they came out with books. They donated the books to the public libraries, to the schools. And when the teacher will ask the students what happened in martial law, they go to the library. The only book they will find is the book of the Marcoses, saying that it was the golden years of the Philippines. So we have to correct this. We have to have the correct history of martial law, and the lessons of martial law must be taught also to our school children. Because if we do not learn from history, we will be bound to repeat. That's very obvious. So the answer to that is we have to educate everyone again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Carpio. Our next question po is to Justice Morales. Ito po ang kanyang tanong. Ano raw po yung isasagot ng mga supporters ni VP Robredo at ng Isang Bayan sa mga Marcos loyalists na ang bukang bibig ay hindi na magnanakaw si Bongbong Marcos kapag siya ay maihalal na presidente kasi siya naman ay mayaman na at time to make bawi na raw po?
I have always quoted that Spanish saying that el que tiene más quiere, he who has wants some more. Do you think he will not be that greedy when he goes to Malacanang? Excuse me, that's not fair. If indeed they are changing a new leaf, that should have happened a long time ago, but up to now they insist that walang nakaw na yaman, or if at all, kung may nakaw na yaman, they still want to get a big pie in the chart. So that's baloney.
Okay, thank you very much, Justice Chit. And just a follow-up question lang daw po. Do you believe that the Marcos loyalists and supporters will still change their minds or their votes before the election? May pag-asa raw pa po ba silang magbago ng kanilang mga boto?
If I may, JP, kasi kanina nabanggit ko yan. Sa akin,
okay.
yun dapat yung treatment natin sa lahat. Kailangan kay Marcos loyalist man yan, o in fact kahit Duterte nga na supporter, we will try to convince them. Hindi pwedeng, kasi alam nyo, karamihan naman sa kanila mahirap eh. Karamihan naman sa kanila nagdurusa rin ngayon eh. Hindi naman sila mga taong mga mayayaman na they have all everything. So ipaliwanag lang sa kanila yun. And I think for us to win an election, we need to convince not just our supporters, but even those who support the other candidates. And I always believe, and gusto kong sabihin muli, makukumpinsin natin yan kasi nasa side natin yung katotohanan eh. Hindi pwedeng manatili ang ganitong false narrative. And I'm sure ang sambayan ng Pilipino in the end will look for the truth and justice sa darating na halalan. Salamat po.
Okay, thank you very much po. Justice Chit, may idadagdag po ba kayo, Justice Tony, before we proceed to another question? Please unmute po, Justice Chit. Thank you. Hello.
Sagot ni Neri. Siguro Neri has already fully answered the question.
Okay, thank you. Justice Tony?
Yes, I think the people will change their mind if they see the truth. And all we have to do is to explain what is the truth. And they will listen. I have faith that the Filipino people will decide correctly if presented with the facts, with the truth. Thank you.
Okay. Another question po para sa ating mga panelists ngayong araw. Masasabi niyo ba na ang sitwasyon ni Senator Laila de Lima ay maikukumpara sa mga dating political prisoners nung panahon ni Marcos? At kung pareho nga, dapat bang sampahan din ng kaso si Duterte dahil dito? Thank you. Anyone can answer po.
Well, we have to wait for the decision of the court. Because if Senator de Lima is acquitted, and I believe he should be acquitted because the cases against her are without any basis, then she can file a case of unjust prosecution against those who prosecuted her without any basis. That is her right, and that will follow. Thank you.
Yeah. Another question po. How will we convince those daw po who believe that it's okay to vote another Marcos because marami namang nagawa, lahat naman nagnakaw, pero at least sila maraming napagawa tulad ng heart center, lung center at iba pa?
Let me answer that. Yung ginawa nilang infrastructure, lahat yun inutang. So umutang sila from foreign banks, from World Bank, and then ninakaw yung utang, nagtayo sila ng mga infrastructure, iniwan yung pagbayad ng utang sa Filipino people. Kaya 20 years after Marcos left, we were still paying the debts. Yung bang gusto natin? Of course, may nagawa sila, pero saan nila kinuha yung pera pang gawa ng mga infrastructure na yun? Utang. Yung utang, kinaltasan nila sa mga kontrata. Nakita ninyo yung Westinghouse. Yung Westinghouse nuclear plant. Utang yun eh. Hindi nga natuloy kasi may graft and corruption. Ang laki ng commission na punta sa kanila. That is the example of what happened. Inutang natin yan, kinatasan nila yung inutang sa mga kontratista, tapos tayo ngayon nagbabayad. Wala na sila, 20 years later, wala na sila, binabayaran pa rin natin ang utang. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Neri, I think you want to say something.
Pwede naman gawin ng kahit sinong presidente umutang ng 500 billion eh. Tapos yung 200 billion o 300 billion ipagawa niya ng kung ano-ano dyan. Tapos yung 200 billion, nakaw na yon, bulsa na yon. Pwede ba naman yon? Tingnan mo naman itong utang ni President Duterte, 2.6 trillion noong 2020, 2021, 2.1 trillion at least. So saan napunta yun? Dapat imbestigahan nga yun eh. Hindi pwedeng gano'n. Si Hitler may ginawa ba? May ginawa naman siguro building yan. May ginawa naman siguro hospital yan si Hitler. Pero it doesn't justify na mag-elect ka ulit ng another Hitler just because may ginawa siyang hospital. Secondly, nung panahon ng gutom, naalala ko pa yun, nagpatayo ng cultural center. Siguro naman okay naman mapanood ng mga Pilipino yung yung mga nagbabalay na galing sa Russia o kaya mapakinggan itong mga sikat niya pianista sa cultural center. Pero yun ang problema natin. Ngutang ka ng utang, ibaon mo sa utang, tapos cultural center, ipatayo mo, gutom ang problema noon. Dati, nung bata ako, may binibigyan ako ng nanay ko ng kupon kasi hindi kami makabili ng bigas. Pumipila ako nung bata ako para makabili ng bigas. Walang bigas. Later on, after a few weeks, naging mais na lang, wala na mabiling bigas. So yun bang golden era? Yun ba yung may nagawa? So sa akin, hindi yan dahilan. Otherwise, ang mangyari dyan, i-encourage natin lahat ng public official na sige lang, magdakaw kayo na magnakaw, basta gumawa ka rin ng clinic, basta gumawa ka rin ng ospital, hindi pwede yun. Pag ang mga ordinaryong tao kinukulong, ang ordinaryong tao ay pinaparusahan, dapat din yung mga mayayaman at espesyal na mga Diyos sa katulad ng mga Marcoses ay dapat din masingil at maparusahan at hindi hayaan. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Attorney Colmenares. Another question from Ms. Sandra Aguinaldo of GMA7. Legally secured po ba ang ownership ng government sa Imelda Jewels currently at the BSP Vault? Maaari po ba yung maibalik kay former First Lady Imelda Marcos? Anyone can answer po. If Justice Tony, would you like to answer this question?
I'm not too familiar with the status of the jewels, but I think Imelda has not filed any case, so I think that's prescribed already. His right to recover is prescribed already.
Okay.
Dagdag ko lang, JP. Ako rin, hindi ko rin alam ang status ng mga kaso dyan sa jewelry na yan. Pero ang tanong lang talaga dyan, sabi ng Korte Suprema sa Republic versus Sandigan Bayan, $304,000 lang ang net worth nyo. Kasi pag presidente ka, hindi ka pwede mag-practice ng law, hindi ka pwede mag-exercise ng ibang profesyon. So saan mo kinita yung pera mo? Tapos may jewelries ka. Imagine, nung sabis doon sa pagdating nila sa Hawaii, may dala-dala silang crates ng mga kung ano-anong yaman, kung ano-anong jewelry. May $7 million worth of cash pa. So saan yun? Hindi umabot ng 1 million yung income nyo. So para sa akin, ano pa man yung status niyan, dapat ma-forfeit yan kasi public official yan, hindi niya ma-explain kung saan ang galing. Anong ebidensyang sinabit nila sa korte? Ba, kung totoo yung gold nila, di sinabit nila sa korte yung mga gold na yan, di tapos na lahat ng kaso. Pero the fact na wala silang sinasabit at pinapakitang ganong ebidensya, hindi totoo yung gold. Kaya dapat ma-forfeit yung mga jewelries man na yan kasi hindi talaga nila ma-explain kung paano sila nagkaroon ng ganong yaman na kung saan wala naman silang kinita at batay sa income tax nila o sa mga sinasabi nilang official documents, hindi umabot sa ganyan ang yaman nila. Salamat po.
Thank you po. Para raw po sa mga hindi abogado, ano daw po yung pwede nilang gawin sa usaping diskwalifikasyon ni Marcos Jr. na nasa COMELEC ngayon? Thank you.
Well, the case is now submitted for resolution. So we just have to wait for that. And of course, whoever wins, whoever loses, the case will be appealed, will still go up to the en banc. From the en banc, it will go to the Supreme Court. But I think the bottom line is, has Bongbong Marcos been convicted of a crime? He has been convicted. There's no doubt. It cannot be questioned. There's a decision. They don't deny that he has been convicted of a violation of the tax code. So do we want a president who has been convicted and who remains a convict? Because when you are convicted, you are a convict. And when you serve your sentence, you are an ex-convict. An ex-convict is one who has served his sentence. But Bongbong Marcos has not served his sentence because he has not paid the fine to the regional trial court. So he remains a convict. And you have a convict convicted by final judgment of the court, who is running for president. Do you want a convict to be the president of the Philippines? Is that what we will show to our children and grandchildren? Thank you.
Okay. Ayan po, dyan po nagtatapos ang ating open forum po, no? So maraming salamat po sa mga nagbigay ng kanilang mga katanungan sa ating members ng media. Before we formally end, we will go po sa ating mga parting shots or last messages po ng ating mga conveners na nandito po sa ngayon. Umpisahan po natin ang parting shots or concluding message from Attorney Nery Colmenares, to be followed by Justice Chit Morales, and Justice Tony maybe can be the last. We have also Attorney Howie with us if Attorney Howie would like to share with us his message also. So Attorney Nery, kayo po muna. Thank you.
Ang parting shot ko lang talaga, ito involves the entire Filipino people. This is an issue. Not only because na dahil tumatakbo si Bongbong Marcos sa pagka-presidente, kundi ang perang nakahaw galing sa mamamayang Pilipino na malaking tulong sa atin. So sana ang tuloy natin sa lahat ang ating pag-explain sa lahat ng tao. Ako, ulitin ko lang yung sinabi ko kanina, naniniwala talaga ako. Mananaig ang katotohanan sa 2022. At dapat lang may tiwala tayo sa sarili natin at may tiwala tayo sa kakayanang sambayan ng Pilipino na hindi papayagan magkaroon ng Marcos muli sa Malacanang. Salamat po.
Thank you very much. Attorney Howie, you want to say something before Justice Chit? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, just to emphasize, thank you again to our speakers and to everybody that has joined. But sa ating taong bayan, sa mamamayang Pilipino, sana, sinabi na po natin, makinig po sa katotohanan, wag po tayo sa fake news. At sana po, ipaglaban po natin ang ating bayan at kami po ay naniniwala na ang mamamayang Pilipino ay sana naman nitong halalan ang taong bayan ang mananalo. Wala na po sanang Marcos o Duterte na mananaig sa susunod na halalan. Salamat po. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much, Attorney Howie. Justice Morales, thank you.
Mga kababayan, ang isipin natin ay ating future. Future not only for us, but for our children and our children's children. Sana sa darating na halalan, isipin natin kung sinong ating i-elect. Dahil tingnan muna natin ang bakas ng buhay ng mga kandidato. Yung mga kandidato may sakim sa pera, may mga kandidato na may pera, pero hindi naman maliwanag kung ano ang plano nila sa Pilipinas. Mga kandidato na gusto lang magiging presidente, pero wala namang general interest na nasa kanilang agenda. So, pag-isip-isipan natin, huwag tayong madadala o masisilaw sa pera na ipinapamudmud nila. Dahilan niyang sandali lang yung tanggapin na 5,000, 10,000, or even more, madaling malaspag yan. Pero kung isipin ninyo ang ating future na hindi nadadala dahilan sa pera, magiging maunlad tayo at hindi tayo magsasuffer as we are suffering now. Thank you.
Thank you very much po. Sorry po, before Justice Carpio, we also have with us COA Commissioner Heidi Mendoza, also an Isang Bayan convener. Maybe we can also ask her to give her concluding message. Thank you.
Magandang umaga sa lahat ng mga nakikinig at of course, salamat sa ating mga piling at mga kagalang-galang na panauhin. Uulitin ko po yung mensahe, no? Ibalik ang yamang ninakaw, huwag ang magnanakaw. Hindi ho ba tunay na nakakalungkot o nakakainsulto na yung nakaw na niyama, yung yaman na ninakaw, ay siya pa hong ginagamit sa pagkakalat ng maling impormasyon, siya rin po yung ginagamit para magpatuloy sila at magkaroon ng opportunity na muling makabalik sa pang-aabuso ng kapangyarihan at pang-aabus at pagnanakaw sa bayan. Nakikiusap po ako, lalong-lalo na po sa mga dati kong kasamahan sa paglilingkod sa gobyerno. Alam po natin kung gaano kahalaga ang pera ng bayan at dapat personal sa atin yung ninanakawan tayo, lalong-lalo na kung ang ninanakaw ay pera ng bawat Pilipino. Magandang umaga po at maraming salamat JP Calleja. Attorney Calleja.
Maraming salamat din po, COA Commissioner Heidi Mendoza. Then finally, Justice Tony Carpio. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. I consider myself a student of the presidency of presidential power. I've been the chief presidential legal counsel of President Ramos. And I've been there in Malacanang. And the president is the role model, is the father of the nation, the role model of our children and grandchildren. Do we want the father of the nation, the role model of our children and grandchildren, to be a convict, certified convict, who did not serve his sentence, who refuses to pay his deficiency income tax, his fine for non-filing of the income tax return, who refuses to pay the estate tax of his father, and instead use that money for his election campaign without paying the estate tax, which should be the first paid before any single centavo can be given, can be inherited by the heirs. The estate tax must be fully paid. We are all subject to that rule, to that law. Lahat tayo, before we can get our inheritance from our parents, we have to pay the estate tax. Here is Bongbong Marcos. He refuses to pay. He's the administrator of the estate. He refuses to pay the estate tax. Yet he wants to be the president. And if you are the president, you have to convince the people to pay their taxes, because without taxes, the government cannot run. If people do not pay their taxes, there will be no government. The government cannot run. There will be no school teachers who will be paid. You cannot maintain the roads and bridges. So you have to convince, if you are the president, to pay the people to pay their taxes correctly. But why will the people pay their taxes correctly when you refuse to pay your own tax? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Tony. And with that, isinasara na po natin ang ating isa na namang edisyon ng Tapatan Media Forum. Naway marami po kayong nakuha sa ating mga speakers ngayong umaga, at naway nakatulong po kami na sana nakahubog sa inyong pagpipili kung sino ang tamang leader sa ating bansa. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga taga-media na dumalo, at paantabay na lang po sa pag-aanunsyo na naman kung kailan na naman ang ating isang Tapatan, Isang Bayan. Sa muli, ito po si Attorney JP Calleja na nagbabati. Maraming salamat at God bless po sa inyong lahat.
Panahon na ng pagpili, panahon na ng halalan.
Madami namang kandidato, madaming mukha at pangalan.
Sino kaya ang bagay sa ating bansa? Hindi lamang forma at salita. Sino o sino kaya?
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Sino kayang mananalo at magiging totoo
Sa pagnanais ng taong umunlad sa madaling panahon.
Sino man siya, pag-asa kaya ang dala.
Sana siya'y tuwid at tapat sa bansa.
at sa